Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Ever since the August 2023 elections in Zimbabwe, as the results came, Chamisa has claimed that those elections were rigged. And as in the past, did not want to accept that they are legitimate, the result is legitimate. Unlike in 2018, he challenged in the Constitutional Court the result. This time, he announced that he was not going to do so and leave SADC to do it. As we know, SADC had issued a damning report on those election results, and so did the AU. In fact, most other reputable democratic observer missions that had witnessed the 2023 elections condemned the elections as a farce. So Chamisa said he wasn't going to challenge it, he was going to leave it to SADC. And for the last 9 months, there's been reports, notably from a reliable source within SADC Secretariat, the public were told, was doing something about it to resolve the disputed elections. Chamisa himself has occasionally sent out Twitter messages that change is coming, implying that SADC are doing something about the disputed elections. And whenever some of those stories came out, been some even videos talking about SADC leaders meeting and questioning Mnangagwa's legitimacy. As much as many people have accepted that SADC's damning report surely should have given SADC the impetus to act on it, to deny Mnangagwa political legitimacy. The bottom line is SADC accepted the report, but decided to do nothing about it. The reason for it, I think, is threefold. Number one, MDC CCC have participated in flawed elections, even when they had the golden opportunity to implement reforms to stop ZANU-PF breaking the elections. Number two, Chamisa himself participated in these previous elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, and against SADC's own advice in 2013 that they should not participate in flawed elections. And the third and final reason is Chamisa and company conned the people of Zimbabwe to participate in these flawed elections, promising them that they would win them because he had plugged all the vote-taking loopholes. In other words, he enticed the opposition party, CCC, and the supporters, and they participated in their millions. Nearly 2 million Zimbabweans participated in those elections to vote for Chamisa. And so, if the opposition party and the people of Zimbabwe themselves participate in these flawed elections, knowing they're flawed, I think it's fair enough to say for SADC to say, well, who are we to say you shouldn't participate, or to rule that the elections are not credible? So those were the reasons. But after 9 months of maintaining that SADC was doing something about it, coming up with all these videos, making these outrageous claims that something was about to happen. In fact, the latest one was that in June, SADC was going to hold fresh elections in Zimbabwe, and SADC was supervising those elections. That video came out, and it had Chamisa's own picture in one corner, which would imply that he was aware of the video and he didn't make any effort to deny it. But after 9 months of making these claims, Chamisa is finally coming out now and admitting that while he had been trying to pressure SADC to do something about it, SADC has all but ignored him completely. He has been following on SADC to find out what they were doing about it, and SADC has not even bothered to respond to him. He wrote them the first time in September last year, and they responded and saying that, acknowledging the receipt of his letter of concern. And yet they've done nothing about it, and ever since they've never responded to any of his follow-ups. And so now Chamisa is coming out because he's facing with June, and it's only going to be a few days before we get into June. He would have faced the reality that he had promised the people of Zimbabwe that there would be fresh elections in June, and many of his gullible supporters had believed that. And now he's trying to tell them that there won't be, that those claims that there would be June elections were false, were fake news. SADC has never responded to him about those. So at least that is one thing that has been cleared. So then all this big announcement of update on the resolution of the August 2023 elections is actually Chamisa finally admitting that the news that SADC was doing anything to resolve this issue was a lie. As far as SADC is concerned, this issue is dead and buried. The announcement that there was going to be fresh elections in June was a lie. So that at least is resolved. Now let's look at the statement itself. I think there are some points that we can easily pick on that statement, which I think needs to be addressed, although I've addressed them in the past on this platform. But I think in the light of his announcement, we should address them again. So the first item there is, as you are aware, he said in its announcement, following the shambolic and disputed August 2023 elections, we held nationwide consultations with you, the citizens, and all the other relevant stakeholders on the ways and means to resolve the electoral fraud. I find it ridiculous that he is calling the 2023 elections shambolic, and yet he is the one who insisted in participating in those elections, claiming that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. We can't have this cycle of one day claiming that he has strategies of winning rigged elections and convincing his followers that they should participate in their numbers. And when they've participated and given ZANU-PF legitimacy, he turns around and says, oh, the elections were shambolic. This is just not on. The issue of shambolic, for instance, is true. One of the issues that was raised by Tim Pachelu for those who were following the elections was this is a group of individuals who had a closer look at Zimbabwe's voters' roll. And they came to the conclusion that that voters' roll was in a shambolic condition. And yet, surprise, surprise, Chamisa insisted in participating in those elections without a verified voters' roll. Many people say it again and again, why are we participating? The law itself is very clear. The law clearly states that ZEC must produce a verified voters' roll at least one calendar month before nomination day. There was no verified voters' roll. Chamisa and company still went ahead and submitted their nominations, knowing fully well there was no verified voters' roll. That the voters' roll was in a shambolic condition. They participated. They submitted their nomination papers. And throughout that campaign period, right up to days before the election itself, Chamisa himself was the one who was saying he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. He would not say which loopholes he had plugged because he claimed that that would pre-warn ZANU-PF. He didn't want to give them heads up on that. So he and his colleagues, Triple C colleagues, participated in 2023 elections, believing that they had measures to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. So for him, after the elections, to come out again and say, oh, these elections were shambolic, this is becoming irritating. We know some of the reforms that were required. SADC had an election observer in 2018, and they came up with a report and came up with 23 reform recommendations. Chamisa knows that not even one of those 23 reform recommendations were implemented. And yet, he still went ahead with the 2023 elections. I think many Zimbabweans have got to wake up and stop being so blatantly abused, cheated even, by claims that I've got ways of stopping ZANU-PF rigging the elections, and yet doing nothing about it. And when the election results come, that's when you cry foul. This is becoming childish. He is claiming there that the elections were flawed. Yeah. And yet, he has been claiming victory. Fellow Zimbabweans, as your presidential choice, you, in your millions, nearly over 2 million, gave a clear mandate, albeit in a disputed, contested election. That mandate cannot be abdicated, abandoned, or surrendered. So he is claiming that he won the presidential election. We cannot have it both ways. If the election process was flawed and illegal, we had no verified voters roll, then the result is irrelevant. And yet here we are, we're back again. This is not only him, his colleagues did the same thing. When SADC and the AU came up with their damning report, saying the election was flawed and illegal, Chamisa's colleagues went ahead and participated in those elections, regardless. And then when those few who did win, they took up their seats. Claiming that they had won the areas where CCC had won, those were liberated zones. The elections in those areas were free, fair, and credible. And the same claim is being made here by Chamisa, that he won the presidential. He has got the people's mandate to be president. And yet, just above it, he was claiming that the process was shambolic. So here we are. We have got this situation where Chamisa and company would accept the election results. The election process was free, fair, and credible if we accept that they won the elections. They want us to judge the election process on the basis of the result, work backwards. If we accept that they won, then the election process is acceptable. It doesn't work that way. If you accept that the process was flawed, If you accept there cannot be free, fair, and credible elections without even something as basic as a verified voters roll, then you can forget the results. The results is irrelevant. But we are dealing here with a group of individuals who are so childish. They want to have their cake and eat it too. And in it, they've caught the whole nation into this meaningless process where one minute they believe they've got ways of stopping ZANU-PF rigging the elections. And then when the results come out, if they're favorable in those areas, urban centers where CCC won, they claim that those areas were liberated zones, elections were free, fair, and credible. And Chamisa, when he looks at the result, he wants to look at the 2 million who voted for him as that is legitimate. But the result, the same result declared by the same individual, ZEC in this case, they gave Mnangagwa, his main challenger, more than 2 million. He wants those disregarded. His result is legal. Everybody else's result is illegal. That is an incredibly stupid argument. If ZEC declared 2 million for Chamisa is correct and is legal, then you must also accept ZEC's declared result for Mnangagwa. If elections in the urban centers, the liberated zones, were free, fair, and credible, and CCC won them, then you must also accept that those areas where you did not win, the elections were free, fair, and credible. If the urban centers can have a free, fair, and credible election without something as basic as a verified voters roll, why shouldn't the rural areas have the same thing? And the converse is equally true. If we condemn the failure to produce verified voters roll, it doesn't matter where, be it in the urban centers or be in the rural areas. If that process is flawed, then it is flawed wherever it is. So this idea that we can have somehow acceptable results where the opposition have won, and then the same process is condemned because the ruling party has won, is nonsensical. What we should be aiming for as a nation is have the democratic reforms implemented so that the process is free, fair, and credible, regardless which area you're looking at. And if we condemn the process as flawed, then we do not look at the results. This idea is that somehow we can start by looking at the results and then work backwards is ridiculous. We should, as a nation, focus on implementing the reforms. Clean up our process. God knows it's not as if it's rocket science. 44 years of rigged elections is a long time, and it's totally unacceptable that we should tolerate this. sorry about that. We should tolerate this meaningless process. 44 years of rigged elections in this day and age. It's unbelievable. Surely we should know what constitutes free, fair, and credible elections. We should know the democratic reforms we require to ensure we have free, fair, and credible elections. And let's just implement those. I would like to close by playing a video clip of Dr. Nevers Mumba. He was the chairperson of the SADC election observer mission in Zimbabwe. And he is explaining what I'm saying here. And he is more articulate and to the point. And I think it is important that we really pay attention to what he's saying and follow it. Thank you very much for being with me, and I'll just play it and close.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, let me be clear that the changing of any dynamic or situation in any of our African countries is a preserve of the citizens of that country, in this case, the Zimbabwean people. An election observation team goes there to support the process by observing and being able to release a statement of our observations that, for instance, in Zimbabwe, we raised several issues of transparency and also the independence of the Electoral Commission and things which happen in many other countries, you know. But at the end of the day, once we produce the report and make it available to the Zimbabwean authorities and eventually to the Zimbabwean people, it really remains the preserve of the Zimbabwean people to fight for the freedoms that they need themselves and to correct those issues that have been observed. The reason why we have multiple observation missions is to ensure that, you know, there is a comparison, you know, taking place between the SADC report and the European Union report, the African Union report, and then they can see that those issues that repeat themselves in all these reports, it's up to the Zimbabwean people. And this is where I appeal to all political leaders, not only in Zimbabwe, especially the elections that are coming in Mozambique, that are coming in South Africa, in DRC. We have to make up our minds that, look, at the end of the day, once the people in the country are given an opportunity to monitor the elections, because they also monitor, it starts not during the day of the elections. They must make sure that the constitutional lacunas that can affect a good election are dealt with months before the election. And they must fight to ensure that there's a level playing field. They should never wait for the time when the election is taking place. They must also insist that the electoral commissions and the governments in those countries abide by international norms in holding democratic elections. And this fight must be more vicious before the election comes.
I couldn't agree with him more. I think it will be unforgivable if, after what SADC and the AU did for us, because I think those were stepping stones for us to get it right, we still go ahead and participate in 2028, and we have yet another rigged election. That will be unforgivable. Thank you very much for joining me tonight, and have a good day.